Today, the icon of Saint Theodosius of the Lavra of the Caves of Kiev, Ukraine, is shedding tears. The icon of Saint Theodosius, professor, the abbot of the Lavra of the Caves of the 11th century AD, shed tears for the events of what's happening in his monastery. Today's post mentions that during today's liturgy, the image of one of the founders of the Lavra began to shed tears. Add evil to them, Lord, add evil to the glorious ones of the earth. Behold, the bridegroom comes in the middle of the night. The life of the saint, the gradual conversion of the Slavic peoples to Christianity, dates back to the 9th and 10th centuries, after the missions of Saint Kirill and Methodius, which was initiated by Saint Photius, Patriarch of Constantinople. The life of Saint Theodosius of Kiev takes place less than 100 years after the baptism of Kiev and Rus, organized by Saint Vladimir in 988 AD. Members of the Christian Orthodox clergy worked to evangelize the country. Saint Theodosius was one of them, and he did it by example of his life more than by his preaching. He was kind, patient, merciful, a man of charity. He was also a brilliant organizer. Saint Theodosius of the Caves of Kiev, also called Theodosius of Kiev.jpg, or Theodosius of Crypts of Kiev, or Theodosius of Kiev, is considered one of the fathers of the Russian monasticism. The life of Saint Theodosius is known thanks to the biography written by monk Nestor just a few years after the end of his earthly life in 1074 AD. Saint Theodosius of Kiev was canonized in 1108 by the Metropolitan of Kiev, Nicephorus I, because of the sect of Saint Theodosius grew after his death and spread to all strata of Russian society. He's always celebrated very solemnly in the Russian church tradition, May 3rd according to the church calendar, May 16 according to the political calendar. The day of his birth in heaven is on August 14 according to the church calendar, August 27 according to the political calendar, and on the day of the collection of his remains. The Russian Empire knew only 4 lavras in its territory, the Lavra of the Caves of Kiev, where we're talking about now, northeast of Moscow, also the Lavra of St. Sergius of Randonez, called also the Holy Trinity Lavra of St. Sergius, the Lavra of Pochkaya, the bastion of Orthodoxy against the Papals, and the Lavra of St. Alexander Nevsky in St. Petersburg, Russia. And like its patron saint, Saint Theodosius of Kiev, as we said, he died in 1174 AD, the leader of the Kiev Caves Lavra is the founder of communitarian monasticism in Russia. As we know, Russia started from Kiev and spread into Russia, which is today Ukraine. Saint Theodosius was born in 1009 in Vasiliev near Kiev. His father died when Theodosius was only 13 years old. Growing up, Theodosius became very pious. He resided in Kursk and engaged in heavy exercise, including body change, while he was still a teenager. In other words, he was doing spiritual exercises. Finally, in 1032 AD, at the age of 23, he fled on foot from Kursk to Kiev, and guided by God arrived at the cave where St. Anthony lived. He was a Russian monk who came from Esphigmenou Monastery of Mount Athos of Greece. Some students have already gathered around him in a semi-hermit group, and falling in tears at the elder's feet, Theodosius begged to be accepted as a disciple. St. Anthony first tried to dissuade the young nobleman, but seeing his ardent love for God, he accepted him and assigned St. Nikon to make him a monk. He persuaded his mother to become a nun at the St. Nicholas Monastery in Kiev, where she found repose. In 1054 AD, Theodosius was ordained a higher monk. After the departure of St. Nikon, continue unceasing prayer, exercising vigil and work, but also exercising love. In 1057 AD, St. Varlam was transferred to another monastery. Theodosius was unanimously chosen by the brothers to be the abbot of the caves of Kiev. Theodosius led the monks as an abbot, but with the paternal supervision of Saint Antony. The fame of Saint Theodosius attracted 100 monks to the monastery. The community then took on a great expansion, so that it became necessary to build new cells and a church at some distance from the caves. Thanks to the people of the Prince of Kiev, Izyaslav, the operation could be carried out. He built a new church which was inaugurated in 1062 AD. This is the founding date of the monastery of Kiev.jpg. Lavra. A communal rule of life was necessary. That is why St. Theodosius commissioned the monk Ephrem, who had made a pilgrimage to the Holy Land and Constantinople, today Istanbul, to learn about the customs of the monasteries of the Christian Orthodox Roman Empire. He brings back a copy of the standard in the famous Studi monastery, written by Patriarch Alexis the Studite, for a monastery he had founded. Now, as we know, this is before the split of the church into the Catholic Church and the Eastern Christian Orthodox Church. There was only one Christian church at that time. Now, the monastery of the Caves of Kiev has now become a real communal faith heir of Eastern monasticism, which was to serve as a prototype for all the other Russian monasteries throughout the centuries. During Great Lent, the saint retired to the cave where they had begun their ascetic life and reappeared only on Friday before Holy Week to teach the monks. He endured in this cave many attacks from the demons, but bravely repelled them by fasting and prayer, and came out triumphant to celebrate the resurrection of the Lord. Above all, he taught by example. He often worked himself in the bakery or in the kitchen, and without a murmur undertook the ministry that other brothers had refused to do. If he learned that the meal had been prepared without the usual blessing of the abbot, or if there had been a quarrel during its preparation, he would order all the food to be thrown out into the fire. When visiting the monks' cells, he found their useless objects, money or food. He immediately burned them and reminded them that a true monk should not have anything special. Saint Theodosius also showed great love for the poor, and he had built a hostel near the monastery where they welcomed all the needy who presented themselves. Every Saturday the saint sent a load of bread to the prisoners in the prisons of Kiev, having obtained by his charity and perseverance in prayer great grace. The miracle of the floating monastery. One night the thieves wanted to steal the valuables in the church, but every time they approached, they were repelled by an angelic voices coming from inside, which they thought were those of the monks. When the monks came for Mass in the morning, the thieves wanted to rush into the church and slaughter them, but to their surprise, they suddenly saw the church being lifted into the air. They fled, and shortly afterwards their leader and 3 of his companions came to ask the saint's forgiveness and to tell him what had happened, for none of the monks had perceived this miracle. May the saint perform his miracle again now that the enemies are at the gates. In the same way that the city of Kiev is called the mother of Russian cities, the Holy Fathers Antony and Theodosius of the Kiev caves are the fathers of the Russian monasticism. This is from Dipen News, and I've translated this for you from a Greek article. And as we said before, Russia actually started from Kiev. Kiev Rus is called. That's the beginning of the Russian nation. It started from Kiev. Many people don't know that. Now, this obviously, as we said before, it's the shedding of the tears that started today. St. Theodosius' icon started shedding tears today. That's not a good sign when the icon starts shedding tears. It's a call to repentance and to peace and to love. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. I've translated this for you from a Greek article. Thank you. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box